Hey there, welcome back to Creepy Encounters. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the videos. What's the most creepy story you have in your local area? Not that long ago, a man killed his wife and children, put them all in bed, and set the house on fire. When the neighbor saw the house on fire, he ran in to help get the children out and found them all dead, soaking wet from being drowned in the tub, tucked in their beds. The man had drowned all their children and shot the wife, after losing his job. It had a huge impact on the first responders and the neighbor. I remember him being this really happy, funny guy, and then just overnight that person was gone. When my sister was in high school, a girl moved into our town from out of state. She lived in that house for a few weeks before she started telling my sister about the wet ghost girl/wet kids that were in her room. She said they'd sit on the bed, or drip on the floor, and she didn't like them. She was terrified people would think she was crazy, but also just couldn't stay in the house. They didn't stay in the house long, nor did the next family to move in. Serial killer Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka. Karla Homolka made a plea deal and did very little time before video evidence was found showing she had a much larger role than she claimed. Ivan Milat, the backpacker serial killer, operated in this area. There's always been an assumption that he killed a lot more people than they found, and also that at least one other person, who was never caught, was involved. This is getting forgotten, but in the 50s or 60s some guy ran a big group home for mentally disabled people who were given up by their families. The government paid him their social security. They lived in pretty neglected conditions. Whenever one of them died, he would bury them in the dirt floor basement and tell anyone so he could keep getting the money. There were some dozen bodies down there, but he ran away during the investigation and lives in Ireland now. Nothing ever happened to him. I drive by the house a lot while working and it gives me the heeps. I wonder if the current tenants know what happened. I live near Bethesda Cemetery in Tien, which was the site of a Civil War hospital. It was a neutral hospital, meaning both Union and Confederate soldiers were treated there, sometimes buried unidentified. As a result, the place is supposed to be full of ghosts. The Confederates lingering there will allegedly harass you if you have a northern accent, and there's a crying woman who can be heard wailing at the far edge of the cemetery at night. Happened in Saudi Arabia. A kid was going to the grocery store when a psychopath teenager killed him with a machete and hid it in the fridge. The father went to look for the kid and he was killed too by the same guy. After catching him, the teenager laughed and cried and he was beheaded. Disappearance of a little girl. She was at her father's house and he claimed that he woke up and she was gone. There were other people in the home and evidence that pointed to some kind of cleanup, but nobody talked. Nobody ever broke down and confessed or pointed the finger at anyone else. It's creepy because these people are just walking around knowing what happened to this little girl and simply won't tell. Where I live, just opposite CA 84, we have the story of a bride ghost appearing every once in a while. It seems she was stood up at the church nearby. Though I haven't seen her, some old families nearby have. One of my close friends' father murdered her mother and killed himself. Poor girl had to be raised by her grandparents. My mom and hers were friends, we even have the same name. Makes me sad to think about that. I live in a college town and there was a serial rapist on campus in the 90s. He was actually stationed at a military base about 45 minutes away. He'd drive down in his free time and look for isolated women walking around at night. Thankfully he was eventually caught and went to prison. There is the story of the yellow tire slasher in my city. Back in the 80s, a part of my city was terrorized by the yellow tire slasher. He or she would go around with a knife and a can of yellow spray paint and slash people's tires, then spray the car with yellow swastikas and dicks. Most people say he probably caused upwards of $100,000 in damages because of how frequently they slashed tires. You can even find dicks and other markings around the city in yellow spray paint. Someone 2 blocks from me was murdered 20 years ago and the criminal was never caught. There's a house a few streets away where the owner passed away and the new people who bought it decided to do some renovations. I think they found the skeletons of like 9 different people plastered into the walls. Detroit, closest large city near me, the Nain Rouge, French for Red Dwarf, is an ominous figure in Detroit folklore. According to legend, Detroit's founder Antoine de la Motte Cadillac encountered a demon-like creature that called itself the Nain Rouge and cursed the entire city. The creature is said to have popped up throughout Detroit's history, usually during tragic events. Sightings were reported during the 1805 fire, which burned almost the entire city to the ground, as well as during the 1968 riots. In 1976, 2 police officers claimed to see what they thought was a child climbing a utility pole during a harsh snowstorm, only to realize it was the Nain Rouge. In recent years, the Nine Rouge has become a beloved fixture in Detroit. In 2010, citizens began having an annual parade in celebration of the creature. In addition, local wine companies and breweries even make wine and beer in honor of the demonic entity. My great-grandpa's house, anyone who was left alone in that house would suddenly die for no reason. The place was soon abandoned with everything left behind in an instant, but my dad in his teenage years would look at the place often, and some bizarre thing would seem to happen. My favorite story is the one with the albino boar that would somehow cover every exit. In high school, my dad brought some friends including my mom to the place, and everything seemed different about it. All plants surrounding the house died, but the house itself was a garden. After they went inside, nothing had seemed wrong, but suddenly brown recluse spiders came down from above. Everybody ran off to drive away, and rumors spread like a wildfire. My parents have been long divorced, and I asked my mom if this actually, and she had confirmed with some more to the story. The very small town had burned the place to the ground when rumor hit the right people. So somewhere in Frederick, Colorado, there's this story of this man who murdered his wife and then drowned his 2 newborn daughters as frying grease. It makes my heart pound just thinking about it. A lot of things happened in my city, some really cool things and some really weird things. But the creepiest thing I know about is the ghost in the middle school I went to, which was really just something the theater kids from years and years before invented to cover up their farts when they were in the auditorium. Israel Keys operated in the same parts of Washington and Oregon as me, and my parents traveled on all the time as a kid. I always wonder if he ever might have followed us. I was living in another house in my area. I move frequently, but moved a little after both my neighbors, a wife and husband, were killed. When they were killed, I was there being babysat and sleeping and saw the corpse of the husband. That there is a rapist man hiding in the forest. When I was a kid, one of the ladies from the municipality that did morning daycare was raped in those woods after being chased by a man. There are multiple groups of young people that went to camp illegally in the woods or just chilling that got approached by a man howling and screaming like a crazy person. To this day it's unclear if they caught him or not, but we haven't heard from him in a long time. I live in West Virginia, and we have a bunch of creepy stories like Trans-Allegheny learned to take asylum, the headless mountaineer student, and also the Sheep's Watch. That thing is pretty creepy, but some bigger ones are Mothman, Flatwoods Monster, and Grafton Monster, but the reason the last 3 are so big, it's probably because the Fallout 76. My hometown was the same place Shonda Scherer's dad lived. His house was a few blocks from my family's home. She was 12, I was 10. I never met her, but the case was everywhere and horrifying. I don't live in Indiana any longer, but my family is still there and I still think about this case. I'll never forget when an FBI agent came to speak at college with our abnormal and forensic psych classes. He said they always find the worst and strangest cases in Indiana. So I live in a small town where people would report strange things happening. Some even think that the place is cursed. Here are some of the things that happen. So the first one is when a plane crashed just outside the town and people would report a plane flying overhead and hear it crash. And the second instance is the story from my dad and his friends. So there was an old cemetery behind some neighborhood, and the people who lived there would hear a baby crying and a woman looking for her baby. The school I went to was also haunted. The lights would flicker and the locker doors would be banged on, and a bunch of UFO sightings. I really hate the town, but I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe for more real-life creepy encounters around the world. See you in the next video. Bye.